Okay, so this is the second assignment, which is a still life of um, a set of eggs. Now, I don't eat white eggs. I only eat the free range organic brown eggs because I'm weird, but that's the way it works. The way the instructions say, they want you to start with the vine charcoal, which is very fragile, little bits of burnt up stick, which is good or not good, depending on how you look at it. Now, not drawing from the photos, I'm drawing from the actual still life, which I can see in front of me, which is blurry on your screen, but as a crisp photo of it so you can see that how it's supposed to look. Now, don't use a reflective surface. In other words, don't use porcelain. Don't use metal. Don't use glass. Use wood or paper or cardboard, anything that's not reflective, okay? We're not dealing with reflections yet. That comes later. Now, so we sketch out our charcoal with our vine charcoal. And I want you guys to use your sighting, okay? That's really important. Use sighting, even on something as simple as this little egg still life. Remember how to do that. You should remember how to do that. You take a pencil and you hold your arm straight, arm's length, in front of your pencil. Close one eye and put your pencil tip at the top of one part of it and your thumb at the bottom. So I'm going to measure the height. So what I'm measuring in the camera is the distance between here and here and how many of those units of measure will fit in here. So what I've got is 1.5 tall. Well, let's see how many wide. 1 height equals 1, 2, 3, and 3/4. Okay, so this height is too big because I need only 1.5 of those. Oops, wrong pencil. I need only 1.5 of those to make the height of the bowl. So I need to bring the size of the bowl down. This is really important. I notice a lot of people are, when they're drawing, they draw the top of the objects bigger than they probably appear, but I can't prove it unless you send me a picture of your still life. And see, using the vine charcoal, the reason you use the vine charcoal is because it comes off pretty easily. The paper still grabs the flakes, but it's more like grit instead of flakes. As long as you don't crush the surface of your paper, you should be okay. So now it's only 1.5 of these high. So let's see. That's 1.5. So now that's the bottom bowl right there. Now again, when you're drawing something that's symmetrical and man-made, like bowls are, you can turn it upside down to double check the symmetry of your object. You'll see immediately if you're leaning one way or the other as far as the object, the symmetricality of the object goes. So let's make that a little bit more. And of course the camera that I'm using is also going to distort it. So only what you can see with your own eyes should you ever really believe. Don't believe anything the camera shows you. No multiple shadows. If you have multiple shadows in your setup, it means that you got light interfering from someplace else. The eggs take up what looks to me about half the bowl. Okay, there's a rim around this bowl. And the rim gets thinner. It appears thinner on the horizontal and appears a little thicker on the vertical plane. I'm only talking about the plane, not talking about actuality. Okay, so then I'll also I'll sketch in the shapes of the shadows, because that gives you an abstract kind of object to be able to draw that your brain can't really name it. I'm also going to, because I'm kind of crazy like that, I'm also going to put in the the fabric. Whoops. That fabric is only just peeking up over the back of that, right there. And then there's a shadow of the bowl here. Okay. We've got a little bit of fabric here, here, and then across here. So before I put that line in, I'm going to measure. I'm going to take my base unit of measure, which happens to be the top part of my bowl, and I'm going to measure down to see where the cloth starts. So now I've got this all sketched in with my vine charcoal. I'm going to get rid of my vine charcoal because it's annoying. So check yourself, check yourself, check yourself. Measure, do the sighting, put it down as accurately as you can, and then check your measurements. And you'll find that the more you do that, the more often you're going to get it right or near right the first time. It's like target practice. You keep practicing it, and then pretty soon you're nailing it. And then you don't have to measure anymore, but you should continue to measure just to be sure. So I'm just going to lightly block in my shadows. I'm going to switch to, I am going to have to use this guy, a stump for this. So I've got it kind of laid out pretty much. Most of the darks are in. Maybe right here, there should be a little more dark. The bowl is darker than the eggs because it's wood. So I'll make that darker. Make this darker. And if you're having trouble discerning what's dark and what's light in your still life, squint at it. Just give it a squint and see. It'll remove the detail, and you can see just where the light is and where it's dark. So then I look on my still life, and I've got a band of white going across here, and the rest of it's pretty dark. So I'm going to push that just a little further in this stage. Because the only white areas I have, the light areas, are these 3 eggs and this highlight here. Everything else is pretty dark. So if you're having a hard time seeing your highlights and your shadows, just squint at your source and then squint at your drawing, and you should be able to then see the difference. Now there's that thing I was telling you about earlier. On this part of the bowl here, you can see it here, right here, just barely. That it's dark, and this is light, and then this is light. The background becomes lighter, and the bowl becomes darker. So here the bowl is light, and the background's dark, and here the background's light, and the bowl is dark. But the background hasn't changed color. It's just, in comparison to the bowl, it appears to be lighter. And don't use your fingers unless you're really committed to it, because once you use your fingers, you'll deposit those oils onto your drawing, which is going to affect the way the drawing looks. In the core shadow, is a form shadow. It goes around the form, so it's very soft. And with the charcoal, you can really smear it around a lot. You can smear around a lot of charcoal before you start to need more charcoal. It's a lot like painting. And you put down a little bit and then rub it in. Just like when I paint, I put down a little bit of paint and then I muck around with it on the canvas. So my paintings tend to be, I mix a lot of color directly on my canvas rather than on the palette. See how I work part of it across and work the same all the way across. I'm not like finishing up one part, making it perfect, and then going to another part, making it perfect. It's better to work across the whole thing fairly evenly so that you give it all an even amount of energy and it looks cohesive and consistent. Yeah, that's what I want to say. All right, I am going to use my charcoal pencils just because it's making me crazy and I got to get in here. All right, I got to get in that little spot right there. I'll try not to use it too much. Use your eraser a lot more with the charcoal than you did with the pencil. And you can squish and squeeze your eraser into a point. And it's almost like you're drawing with white. Pulling it out to make the highlights come back. There's a little reflected light bouncing off of the bowl onto the egg. Tiny, 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 tiny little bit of reflected light, but very, very subtle under there. Hardly enough to notice. But you can see it in the actual still life. You can't see it in the photo. So again, I'm just going to drill that into you guys' head. You got to work from life. You got to work from observation. Photographs are poo. They lie. They're not real. So use a real new stick and it will have a little bit of an edge on it. So that's going to be a little easier to make that subtle edge. But you can cut the dirty part off of your tortillon and have it last a little longer. Once it gets too loaded down with charcoal, it's not much good for the light areas. can get a little gray and dirty, so you don't want to do this too much. I'm just using it to bring out the edge. And that nice sharp cast shadow from one egg to the other. So you can really see how up close and personal the cast shadow as opposed to the form shadow. The difference between those two types of shadow can make a huge difference in your drawing. That's another thing. When you're working with real materials, there's a couple of things as an artist or as a developing artist that it's going to affect. You can't undo, obviously. You can erase to a certain degree, but only to a certain degree. And so everything that you do has consequences. And you have to deal with those consequences and adapt to them if necessary. You put some charcoal where it doesn't belong and you leave a permanent mark, then you're going to have to work that into your drawing somehow so that it isn't a problem. Or give up on the drawing, which is that's very possible too. So I could take this even further. I could keep going with this and fiddling with the edges and developing it until it becomes super realistic and pops off the page. But I want to draw it on gray paper for anybody who cares to watch, just to show you another medium, another way to draw. It's hard to stop because you can always find someplace you can make it just a little bit better. But eventually you do have to stop. Alright, that's it for that. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Alright, new still life. This one's going to be with charcoal pencils. So in this case, I'm going to start with white to do my drawing.